Hi there, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon for all those connecting somewhere around planet Earth. Um, I haven't had the pleasure to have a guest last week as many things were going on my end, but I'm kicking off this week with a beautiful live with Kate, who's going to be joining in from Dallas and talking about her line of work and fashioneering, her company. So, we're going to be talking a lot about brands, the luxury environment, luxury fashion brands, and retailing. But Kate is going to tell us all about that in a few. So, I'm going to kick off this live and invite Kate in. And it's going to just be a little minute. Kate, I have invited you in, and here we are.
Hi,
So,
how are you?
how are you? I'm
I'm great.
fine.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm so happy that we're doing this. I know it took some time to find a suitable time and date. So
Yes,
here we
it did.
are.
It did. I'm glad we got it on the calendar.
It's perfect, and I'm happy that this is your first Instagram live,
My
and I
very
hope
first one. Yes. Welcome
and I hope that
to
the
the
experience is
21st
going to be
century.
positive. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I think so. I think so.
So, Kate, thank you again for joining in. I normally don't do lots of introductions because I like you to start doing the introduction. However, today's live is really about you and about fashioneering. So, tell us more about fashioneering.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm excited to visit with you. I started Fashioneering as a management consultancy in the luxury goods space. We launched 14 years ago. And predominantly when we began, our focus is really on merchandising and kind of overarching strategies. So I had begun my career as a designer before I became a buyer. So I sort of sit in this spot between the kind of high level strategy and I also speak designer. So I know when you're trying to finesse a collection that you also don't want to make sure that you do anything that puts a damper on the creative process itself. So that's a little bit of a nuanced situation. And then over the years, I just found, well, I found a lot of things that were sort of challenges that brands have, and then certainly all of that got really accelerated when COVID hit, like everything, right? So in January of this year, we launched the Fashioneering Lab, which is a little bit different program. It was much more holistic, moving far beyond just helping people polish up their collections and kind of their wholesale strategy to being really completely holistic. And very, very excited that we're launching for 2022. We actually have 35 people who are joining
Whoa.
the Fashioneering team. So it's really exciting, a huge growth for us. And we will now be functioning what the way I'm describing it as is as a growth hub. So this is a place for brands big and small. You could be as big as they come and you're just needing to develop a growth strategy. And when I say growth strategy today, to me that must encompass a purpose-driven strategy. So I think you have to be thinking about everything from inclusivity to sustainability.
Yeah.
All of those things I think are just so much more important. So a lot of more established brands might be struggling to find their purpose, if you will, and kind of modernize. And then we have a lot of younger brands that they began as very purpose driven, but they may have hit a wall in their growth strategy, and now they're needing to do things like entertain going into wholesale, where perhaps they started as direct to consumer, and now they realize that maybe they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. They need to do pop-up stores, they need to do wholesale, they need to do their own brick and mortar. I see your eyes spark at pop-up stores. So so
Because
our,
I have lots of questions about that later
yes,
on.
yes,
That's very exciting, Kate, and actually it hits lots of questions that I wanted to ask you about in detail,
absolutely.
and we're going to be attending to that. But 14 years, wow! I mean, Actually, the past couple of years were very challenging and made all of us rethink retail differently. But
For
mostly,
sure.
how can you describe this change and shift in your own words or eyes of
Mm.
what happened 14 years ago and how the change um, led brands to become what they are today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, and I'll kind of leave it to people who are better experts as far as sociology and technologies and things like that. But there's a tremendous amount of disruption in the fashion industry, and I always go back to one of the things I love about fashion is at the intersection of so many different things, right? It's commerce, it's trade, it's politics, it is sociology, it's psychology, it's so many things. So because we're seeing so much disruption just in our world in general, it's natural that that would be reflected in the fashion industry, right? Our values are changing. You know, it used to be 14 years ago, it was extremely common, unfortunately, for luxury brands to stop at a size 12. That was just
Mm.
normal. Well, today, younger generations are rightfully not going to accept that you are missing 50% of the population. And I'm speaking of women's and US sizes, of course. Um, so I think we're just seeing a reflection of all of the change in our world, a change in, we have younger generations that just view the world differently. Their experience has been different. If you grew up, you were born, let's say, during the last recession, you know, the very definition of luxury is in flux, right? You see it from, you know, is it a pair of Gucci sneakers or Valentino sneakers, or is it a piece of haute couture? And you see, and I mentioned Valentino because I think they're one of the brands who is really successfully managing to speak to a younger consumer's idea of luxury while maintaining the ethos of the house. And I don't think
Right.
it's an easy thing to do. So it's the best way I could describe it is, well, frankly, it's a bit chaotic, right? At the moment.
Yeah, yeah, and if we had always managed to create two different worlds, the luxury brand and the others,
Yeah.
and and today luxury brands are also finding themselves in that difficult position. As you earlier mentioned, there are lots of things that the environment showed today or highlighted, such as ethical practices, sustainability, maybe technology, etc.
Yeah.
And luxury brands didn't know a lot about and how to make them operational. So why today luxury brands need a lot of attention on management level? Are they endangered if they don't pick up on that new wave of things happening in the retail environment?
Oh, for sure. I think if you don't pick up on the new things that are happening, it would be the equivalent of kind of, you know, when the internet came about saying, oh, that internet, it's just going to be a passing fad. We're not really going to get involved. So you're seeing a lot of that. You see a lot of brands who were not front footed on this. They were not proactive. They've caught themselves really behind.
Yeah,
And I think what they're having to do now is quickly do a lot of things. Quickly, you need to be, you know, we have brands, as you're well aware, there are some very well established brands whose own digital presence was not necessarily what it needs to be and not as modern as it was. And they're not, haven't been embracing many of the new technologies that are available. That's even before you talk about things like going digital assets or moving into the metaverse.
right, right. And Kate, lots of the fashion brands and businesses had built models and practices that many looked up to or borrowed from. Is that the case today?
Yes and no. I think that you're seeing a lot of people, you know, you have kind of the big three, right? You have LVMH carrying Richemont, and it's very difficult to poke holes in their business model. They do tremendously well consistently. But then you have a lot of younger brands who we saw over the last 15 years perhaps begin more digitally native, and you're seeing them go through, I think, a bit of a growing pains, if you will. I think initially they thought, oh, we don't need to do what they are doing. And then they've reached a point that they're rethinking that perhaps and going and looking at, okay, actually, maybe we should be looking at what LVMH is doing. I mean, they run like a well-oiled sewing machine. They are a little bit hard to criticize, right?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Why am I asking this? Because most of these smaller luxury brands, or who wish actually to develop and grow in the luxury business, had
Mhm.
always this focus of developing their businesses to look like these top brands.
Mhm.
And they see themselves helpless because they don't have the means, the time, or the power to develop and grow accordingly. I'm seeing more and more brands developing their own ways, styles, and practices. But on the
Mhm.
other hand, consumers aren't still ready to accept these new practices, as the older are still overwhelming. I mean, have we been formatted in our consumption or consumer minds to see luxury in a certain way, to the extent to which we cannot accept other luxury brands catering to us in different ways?
It's a very fair question. I think that it does, we have to recognize for consumer behavior to change, it takes time or it takes a dramatic crisis. And so right now, what we unfortunately have seen are a couple of dramatic crises. You know, we have one, the big one, of course, being COVID, which then affected many others, being the supply chains. So you're seeing consumers who are very accustomed to being able to get whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, seeing that availability, they're not necessarily able to get everything within 24 hours anymore. And I'm wondering if, I think, wondering and thinking out loud, and that some of those changes will slowly change people's mindsets. And that might be wishful thinking on my part. I recognize that. I mean, I'm a little bit of a Pollyanna, but I think if you start realizing that, there were certain goods and goods that people couldn't get over the last couple of years, and it just sort of slows their thinking. I think uh, even when you look at, you have everyone talking about, are you going to be able to get what you want purchase wise in time for Christmas? You're starting to see the consumers think more about what they are buying, how they are buying, how much they are buying. And I hope that that opens up a pathway for the luxury brands who are trying to do things like slower production, production on demand, things that we know are inherently very sustainable, right? Because this overproduction, overconsumption is a problem, but this is also a business that, the fashion industry employs 1 in 6 people on the planet. So it's a
Right.
huge industry, and so kind of finding a balance within those things. But I think that we are going to see we're going to see we're going to see growing pains. We're going to see customers adopting some slower pace things, and that is good news for smaller luxury brands. But then we'll have a lot of stops and starts.
Yeah, yeah. Do you believe that this is like a phase of trial and error that we're going through now today with everything
Absolutely.
happen? Yeah,
Absolutely. I think every day, if I'm talking with a client, more than I used to. It used to be, you didn't do anything until it was as polished and perfected as it could
yeah,
be. But
yeah.
the pace of things today, I said, we cannot allow perfection to be the enemy of good. At a certain point, we just have to keep moving. And that momentum is one of the biggest changes that we see in the
Right.
industry. And just in general, people, the pace was always fast, as you know, but now it is just really a very high speed race.
Right. And the retail environment has put, I believe, luxury brands to the test. So, how is this primary resource scarcity affecting luxury brands? Um, is
Mhm.
the fact that we cannot have access to products that made luxury brands offerings more luxurious going to put these brands up to the challenge?
It's another great question. Let's
Thank
look at the Chanel handbag for an example. They just raised the price of the basic flat bag to
you.
8,000.
16%, I think.
Yeah, it's 8,000 US dollars right now. So that went up from about six, right? Or give or take. So what you saw dramatically happen was that if you went to the resale market platforms, all of those resale goods, that price shot up dramatically. Now,
Yeah,
Chanel is a little bit of an outlier when it comes to, I don't think any of us are expecting them to be embracing resale real quickly. I think that's a whole other conversation. But when you're looking at other brands, I think one of the shifts you will see is the consumer demand is still there. If I want a Louis Vuitton Speedy and I suddenly the price goes up, what happens then is you are seeing more and more consumers go to the secondary market. So that, which is not, wasn't exactly your question as far as supply and demand, but I think it's an interesting aspect of how it is being affected right now.
Yeah, yeah, we're going to attend that
Yeah.
issue in a few, and to keep moving on that idea, I I was curious, and I would like to have your opinion, is to understand how um, these offerings actually or collections that are mainly based on leather goods, animal skin,
Mhm.
gold, diamond, or other valuable resources. I mean, now that these resources are materials that could not be found easily or wouldn't be available anymore, does this jeopardize a brand's offering? I mean, does a brand like Chanel or Vuitton has to rethink the collection and the offering because its initial offering could not be produced anymore? I mean, as
Yeah,
simple as that,
absolutely.
but it's
I think
scary sometimes.
you'll see more and more brands going to like the Louis Vuitton coated canvas or Gucci's canvas. You'll see more people adopting things where they can control the material supply chain
Mhm.
for sure. No
Um,
question about it.
and we have seen like most of the luxury brands, I believe it was Hermes at last, developing their iconic bags with alternative materials.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're already, which was hugely exciting. I think there are two benefits here. One is we know that younger consumers, more and more of them, leather goods in general have less appeal to them from just sort of from a value perspective. So there's that piece, but from controlling your supply chain, that's another aspect. So if you can develop these other materials that essentially you can have on hand and cut and sew, I think you'll again, when I was speaking of the canvas, I think there's every brand around, you'll start seeing them really pushing their canvas bags. You'll see people interested, when you look at these leather alternatives like Milo or whether it be pineapple leathers or mushroom leathers or, all of these other things, they kind of kill two birds with one stone because it helps satisfy the customer who's might be looking for a vegan option or a more sustainable, more humane option. But it also
Yeah.
allows the brand to develop, to really kind of have a better handle on their own supply chain.
Okay, but here's the question that hit my mind this morning.
What's
And
that?
I'm the type of customer who also thought about that. I mean, is there a risk on the luxury brand value if it uses materials that are less valuable? I mean, animal skin is always something of value, and gold or platinum is always something of
Sure.
value, right? I mean, we used to even trade these items, or we used to buy them because we want to give them away to our daughters, or I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and at a certain point, we're buying an item that does not hold the same value, but has the same price. I mean, is this going to
Well,
be
I
degrading,
think I think it becomes a storytelling issue because when you start
right?
to explain to someone the process of what it takes to create a mushroom leather or a pineapple leather or something like that, or even let's even just think about it as like handcraft materials, which have been around, different beads and embroidery and things like that that we have held their value since the beginning of time. I think you'll start to see the marketing really focused more on telling the stories about these materials
Right,
to
right.
create the attraction.
And so it's not anymore about the acquisition of the product itself. It's the experience and the story behind the
Yes,
product,
always.
right?
Oh,
And I see that Sylvia is very happy because she works on storytelling. Thank you, Sylvia, from
yes,
connecting
yes,
from
yes,
Canada.
storytelling for sure.
And we have talked about that point a lot. So thank you for connecting.
Well, I think it's
Um,
hugely important right now because if we have so many different changes, people are changing the materials that they use, they are changing their ways that they are producing things. So to convey the value of these new goods is critical for a luxury brand, right? So it's a really good time to be a marketer who's got a great talent for storytelling these days.
Yeah, and that's a perfect thing to do, right? And we're
Yes.
seeing that these actually the fashion industry is now giving or paving the way for many entrepreneurial brands and designers, and they are gaining a considerable market share. And these new talents are the ones who have the know-how related to technology or exploring new ways of doing things or crafts, etc. And are the bigger luxury conglomerates or groups going to allow these little brands to have their part of the market at a certain
Uh,
point?
this is this is always the David and Goliath question, right? And so I think that I think you will. I think all of us anticipate that you're still going to see a lot of acquisitions
Yeah.
in the from the big brands acquiring the small ones. I think what will be interesting to see is if we have another Italian conglomerate come up, if we have another American conglomerate come up. I think that will probably be um, something that we'll see in the next year or so.
Okay. And you, in your line of work, what are the challenges that small brands or designer brands face when it comes to developing or maybe taking off their luxury brand correctly on the market?
I think the challenges are many. I think the biggest one right now that we're seeing with brands is a sense of overwhelm because there are so many things they need to be doing. They do need to be working on their efforts towards being more sustainable and ideally circular. And they know that. They also need to be working on their digital presence, and they need to be working on their store development, whether that means pop-ups, wholesale, their own brick and mortar, permanent brick and mortar. They need to be more inclusive. So the biggest trend I see is complete overwhelm and figuring out how to cut through all of this noise to come up with an actionable plan, which hopefully is what we are here to do, is help people figure out, yes, you're right, we need to do all of those things, we cannot do all of them at the same time. So let's kind of prioritize and figure out, let's develop a strategy for first things first. And then that ties back to, it's not just overwhelmed kind of mentally and emotionally, their budgets are overwhelmed, right? Because
Yeah,
everyone's
yeah.
saying, well, all right, okay, perhaps I need to go into the metaverse, so I need a chief digital officer. We need to employ a chief sustainability officer. We need all of these things. So what we are doing with the Fashioneering Lab is we've created a product that allows brands to work with 35 executives in this space for about the cost that it would be to work with make one or two critical hires. So
Right.
we're trying to create something that is really a new way of working for brands that is much more nimble, much more effective, and much more cost effective for them, because those are the things that new brands constantly, they have very little resources, right? So where do I put my money when I need to do all of these things? How do I prioritize what to invest in? That's really the big challenge. And
Right.
actually, I can say that's not necessarily unique to new brands. That is the budgets, they have shareholders, they have a certain return on investment they need to make. So just adopting all of these new technologies, hiring all of these new people, they're not necessarily prepared either.
Right, right. And when we're talking about this lab, we're saying that
Mm-hmm.
each entrepreneur is accompanied and would have like a personalized service
Yeah,
because each case is studied on its own.
that's exactly right.
Perfect. I'm curious also to understand if the perception of luxury and luxury brands going to be questioned by the younger generation. Now, everyone is putting their eggs into the younger generation basket.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're all ready for the Gen Z takeover. What is it? In 3 years, they're expected to be 50% of, responsible for 50% of the purchases or something like that. The numbers are pretty daunting. I think
Mhm.
already you see a shift in their value system, proposition, our value system. We talked to when we first began speaking about even things like, to them, streetwear, $1,000 pair of sneakers might be more interesting to a lot of people than a handbag, because they don't really, that's not their jam, right? They're just kind of more, they have a different aesthetic and things like that. So you are seeing certain brands test the waters. You know, Balenciaga, of course, comes to mind as, I think, they're trying to satisfy a lot of people, right? You know, we had The Simpsons and we had the return to the haute couture in the same year from them. So I think that's pretty telling as far as what brands are. But definitely, I think that looking at the younger generations, we need to identify what does luxury mean to them? What type of products do they want? What type of experiences? All of it.
Right. Right. And I was keen to ask about this experience because I see that lots of luxury brand practices are today focusing on engagement, such as online gaming, applications, and all of these things that do not relate to the product at all, rather than the experience or the relationship with the brand. But do you believe that even if at a certain point this is relevant to the consumer or the upcoming generation, is it deviating a little bit from the essence of the luxury brands that we knew?
Yes, it is deviating and it is important both. Both of those things are true. So, you know, when I think about, you know, using the metaverse or gaming in general, I kind of go back to the age-old saying, which because you study the store space, location, location, location. So where are my customers? If my customers are in the metaverse, I need to be have my products in the metaverse if I'm a brand.
Right. Yeah.
Now, but as far as, that's one customer base. I think we are already seeing that our older generations shop for different products. They want a different experience than the younger generations. But I wouldn't have it so siloed. I think both of these groups, we're going to see some overlap in the coming years, right? You'll start seeing more mature people get into gaming and get into, you know, wearing, you know, all of the things, and vice versa. You'll start to see younger generations for whom very old, kind of classic traditional things with regard to luxury are totally new to them. I mean, if you've gone into an Hermes store and if you've bought a scarf, you know it's like buying a piece of artwork. You have someone who is walking through and talking about the process and sharing all the things, and it's really a phenomenal customer experience. So that's something that the mature luxury consumer is accustomed to, but the younger luxury customer, that's not to say they wouldn't be interested in that. I think they just haven't necessarily been exposed. So I think you will also see a little bit of everything old is new again, with regard to things like in-store events and some just, you know, really classic ideas. I kind of chuckled a couple years ago when Nordstrom's opened their big store, and I know they're kind of not really traditional, what we think of as like heritage luxury, but when they opened the new store in New York, there was a huge article about how they were offering champagne in the shoe department to customers. Now, for any of us who are my age or older, I thought there is absolutely nothing new about this. This is like classic. This is luxury retail. This is what you do. My associates years ago when I was at Neiman Marcus, they all had their own refrigerators in their fitting rooms. We would have meals catered when we knew clients were coming in. But this was big news. And that's when, you know, sort of a realization that because many stores got away from some of those things when we started, you know, for a variety of reasons, that those are new experiences that a younger customer would like just as much as, you know, the baby boomers and Gen X who've already experienced them.
Right. And that's really, really interesting. And as you said, some of the practices are coming back to life, sometimes in a different setup, but maybe brands are reutilizing them to give more value to the experience. And yes, we see that Sylvia is mentioning how Gucci has been reaching out to younger generations, the new collab between Balenciaga and Gucci, and even the tour campaign of the Hermes Fit. That has really taken the social media world by storm. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing that a brand like Hermes, who has like this halo, the luxury halo, is doing all of these things that are not at all related to the luxury bag, but still create lots of attention and a greater visibility maybe to open up a newer market.
Absolutely.
And Kate, we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about the second-hand market, recycling and upcycling, and the luxury brands are paying much attention to that. How do you, or what's your take on the secondhand market in the luxury world?
I think you'll see, so I think in the coming years, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would anticipate, my very best guess is that within the next couple of years, you will not only see the brands embrace it, I would imagine quietly back of the house, they're building their own platforms. They don't want to give that business to the real
Yeah,
investors.
yeah,
Like, they'll bring it back in-house. And they're already creating the blockchain technology, which is going to enable them the authentication and, to track and trace the items. So you can see that they're putting the steps in place. I mean, it's a huge market, and I don't believe it actually hinders your full price, regular price business. I think it is a new revenue stream. It can, if a brand and whether it's a vertical brand or whether it is a multi-brand retailer, it can offset your promotional sales, which if you are desiring to be a more sustainable company, this is how you do it. You do need to recapture that volume that your company, it was already baked in. These companies had X amount of volume that came from sale goods. So you can't really just lose those sales when you're trying to shift towards a more sustainable model. I think that that's a mistake a lot of people in the sustainability space make, is to say to brands, oh, you're just producing too much, you need to stop making so much. Well, when they do that, they have to get those sales. You have to replace the sales that were affiliated with that. And that was always your aspirational customer, your entry-level customer. So slowly we are seeing that the person who used to shop markdowns and sales is more likely to say, no, I still want the Chanel bag, but I can't afford the new one at $8,000, but I'm going to start searching for one. And so instead of buying a lesser brand, a diffusion brand, a markdown, they're going to start doing resale. So that's why I think that you will definitely see most of these brands bring it back in-house.
right. Really interesting. And I believe Chanel already acquired its market, and we will we will have to observe
Yeah,
the rest and see.
Chanel is the big one to watch always, right?
Yes.
So many reasons.
And Kate, I have a couple of more questions related to technology, social media, and the digitalization of the luxury retail outlets. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at first, I remember it was back in 2008 when technology started taking off. Luxury brands had a reserve over everything related to social media, yet alone having a website or a transactional website. And
Yeah.
then things change, and all of this conversation changed. Now we see that it is the luxury brands who are at the avant-garde of technology. I mean,
Right.
today you can go to a Ralph Lauren virtual store, and you can browse the store and the collection at the convenience of your desk or home. So is digitalization also helping luxury brands, and in which way is it helping or not?
Well, I think it helps in a lot of ways. It's really, it's a new, well, it's a revenue stream in the same way that, 15 years ago, when just having an online presence at all, having an online store was like opening new stores. So there's the opportunity, if you're selling on like social media and things like that. But in addition, again, it kind of gets back to if you're a luxury brand, you need to be speaking to all of your customers. And so if many of your customers are in these spaces, this is not just a place they go to buy product. This is a place they go, this is part of how they experience the world, right? You're communicating with other people on social media. You and I are having a conversation with a huge ocean between us and time zones and stuff. And this is part of how people interact. So I think that it is, it's really critical for brands to stay there. But the other thing that's interesting is as you're seeing all of these technologies get adopted by luxury brands, the actual talent pool, the people who work for these brands, is very different than it was even a decade ago. It's super common now for someone who is a computer scientist or something to consider going into the fashion industry, where before that might not have it would not have necessarily attracted that person at all. So
Right.
now when you are around the table with your colleagues, it's a very diverse group. It's as far as diverse of interests and experiences, and I think that that will you will see that in how the brands, the products they develop, how they market their products, you know, all of the things.
Right. And finally, we have seen that this digital aspect is also helping the physical retail store get a hybrid feel and
Yeah,
connecting this online or virtual world with the physical world. And
yeah.
this being said, we see that more and more of these luxury brands are experimenting in new retail formats. The pop-up stores are
Yes, yes, yes. I
are
love your
some of
I
the
loved your comments about, you know, everyone thinks pop-up stores are new, and it's actually been around from the beginning. From the moment
yes.
we started selling goods to each other, we were popping up in the town square with our apple cart, right?
Right, right. And I was always looking at all of these practices that luxury brands have been doing. And it's funny how these brands have taken every imaginable opportunity to create formats that are considered today rather touch points than retail outlets.
Right.
So what are your comments also on today's luxury retail distribution strategies,
Sure.
and whether this distribution strategy is starting to look a little bit different than it was a couple of decades ago?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's worlds different, but then some things are the same, right? So I think today a consumer will likely their start it's these are just different starting points. Someone may start and go see an item in a store, and then they come home and they go online, and then they find it in their social media and they start looking at it. Now, where they if they decide they ultimately want to buy it, you know, it's anyone's guess whether they may end up buying it on in a digital way or if they buy it in the physical store. But that whole process is almost like window shopping. Window shopping, we don't window shop anymore in the same way, not anymore, not in the same way. Now when people kind of go window shopping, they're window shopping through their social media, right? And
Yes.
so likewise, you could have someone who, when you're in the stores, yeah, back in the day, you know, years ago, it used to be if you went into a luxury store and you were looking for something in particular, perhaps they didn't have your size or the color that you wanted. If you had a great selling associate, which if you're in a luxury store, hopefully you did, that person will find that good for you, right? They're going to find it in another store and have it shipped to their store for you to come in or have it delivered to your home. There's nothing about that that's new. Now, the only thing that's new is instead of getting on the phone or walking over to the cash register, they're probably doing it from a tablet. And so when you come in, I think people are recognizing that the stores are almost more like showrooms now in many ways. And that has, you know, some benefits and some challenges. But I think that the way most luxury customers shop now is it is multiple touch points before a sale is made. So whether I find the product or I'm introduced to the product originally in a physical store and I want that experience, or whether I buy it online, I think if COVID taught us anything, I think most people, whether you were in fashion and retail or not, realized just how much they really valued shopping in stores. It was always about more than buying product. This was entertainment. This was a sense of community. This was an event. You know, women would get dressed up, go to lunch, do a little bit of shopping, you know, that kind of thing. And I think when globally we saw that people couldn't go do that anymore, a lot of people really realized how important it was to them, how much they valued that experience of going into the store and being able to touch the items, being able to have a conversation with the selling associate, you know, all of that. So I think that we will just continue. I think we're kind of getting our stride,
Right.
figuring out how much of it is happening in the digital space, how much of it is happening in the physical space. And I guess we're all landing on it is a phygital experience, as they say.
Right, right. And I had also the pleasure to meet someone maybe a couple of months back who defined this as being unified commerce. It is looking really at creating like the cloud connecting every imaginable touch point to
Yeah.
help customers start somewhere and end their journey somewhere else.
Yeah.
And on a final note, this notion of experience and the shopping experience in the physical store is really very important, and it still is very important.
Yeah.
So, how do you see today brands developing a beautiful shopping experience in their stores?
Well, a lot of people are trying different things. I mean, you see even companies like, I'll use them as they're a great example, Louis Vuitton doing pop-ups all over the place with different, it could be just the men's or it's just this collection, things like that. Um, One of the areas I think that you will see as far as like getting back to experience is we've kind of come full circle, and so many people were focused, so many retailers were focused on, I'd say, kind of the sparkly things, all of the techno flashy da 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 da, and they got away a little bit from the amazing customer experience that was
The essence of experience,
exactly
right?
right. That was always the best. I had some of the best sales people in the world who used to work for me, and I can tell you, it was about their personal experience with the customer. So I think that you'll see more investments in that. That gets back to kind of what we spoke of earlier, that while we have all of these new technologies that brands are adopting, there is still this everything old is new again. And so a lot of the ideas of a very high touch experience with a selling associate, a real person, is going to be something you see more people invest in.
Right. Amen to that.
Yes, I know. Well, you can always tell, like those of us who really are store people, right? I mean, I
Exactly. Right.
absolutely love it, love it, love it. I don't think it's going anywhere. I do think we saw a lot of brands and retailers certainly overexpand in different parts of the world, specifically in the US. There were a lot of people who had too many stores. I don't dispute that. But those who've been talking about the end of the retail store, I think, were sadly mistaken. So
Yes,
I should
yes.
say mistaken.
Right. Right. Oh
We're
my
we're
God.
we're people that we thrive on communities. So it makes sense that people will want both a community, whether it's in your metaverse, some kind of there, but also in a physical space.
Right. And that's really important to keep it at the heart, I believe, of any
Yeah.
brand's management and development.
Yes.
Kate, I believe that I asked all of the questions that I wanted to ask. Is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation and that we haven't elaborated?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come visit with you. This was a pleasure. It's always fun to visit about, this business
Thank you.
that we're both so passionate about. And what are you seeing? What are the trends that you see happening in the next couple of years?
Well, I have to join you on the majority of things that you're saying, and I had been asked a couple of questions, and my students actually were intrigued, and they told me, Ralia, what do you think is going to happen next in retail? And I simply said nothing and everything,
Yeah,
because we are living in this era where the change is happening and we have to cope up with it. And I believe that we have to have faith in the change that is going on, as we have no control over it and we have
right,
absolutely no visibility in any managerial sense. So it would be very pretentious for us to just say that I know what's going to happen tomorrow, because we don't.
correct,
And it's really important for us to acknowledge all of the things going on and that are being appreciated, such as the circular economy, sustainability, technological aspects like the physical, digital, and all of these virtual worlds that are
right,
going to, I don't know, be created somehow, which is a little bit scary and confusing, and we don't know what happens.
right.
But what I am sure of is this human aspect of retail, and I really gamble on that. And I really know that the social aspect, the human aspect would remain.
Yeah,
And if
great,
we take a little moment to invest in that through experiences, design, and building connections through that touch point, between the brand and the target audience, I believe that we could have a beautiful advantage over others and
Yeah.
still make sense to our customers. This is the only thing today I believe is worth looking at deeply. I don't know if you
Yeah.
join
I
me
mean,
on
I
that.
think at the end of the day, people, we are always going to aspire to have beautiful things, quality things, and be around, have lovely experiences, and be with other people. So those things aren't going to change. How
Right,
and when and how we do it, but I think if you can kind of stay focused on that, it helps from being a little bit overwhelmed from all of the big changes that are happening in the industry and
right, right. Kate, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation.
oh, thank you. My pleasure.
I don't know if the sound is still clear on your end. I believe I had a little cut, but I want to thank you again and thank everyone who joined us this evening. The conversation will be available on IGTV and later on YouTube. And Kate, thank you so much again, and good luck
Thank
with
you.
the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful initiative. And
Oh,
hopefully
thank
we
you.
meet
We're
up.
really excited.
And
We're very
hopefully we
big.
meet up soon on digitally or maybe physically whenever we can
Yeah,
to talk
great.
more about fashion and luxury. Thank you so
Sounds
much,
great.
Kate.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.